It's space weather! You're looking at a very, very grand solar minimum sun. You can see a coronal hole rotating in, and besides incredibly low activity, there's not a whole lot else to report on. Let's take a look at 304 angstroms. Some serious filamentary activity on the western limb. Take a close-up of that. Looks pretty violent. Also on the northeastern limb. Interesting. There are also some filaments in this area, but they're pretty tough to see. Take a look at the 171 angstroms view. Not that much to report on here other than a little bit of activity. Oops. A little bit of activity in this area. And that coronal hole is well enough defined to be seen on this view, which is not always the case. Take a look at the magnetic lines. Once again, you can see the coronal hole is very well illustrated by the magnetic lines drawn in here. I'm not exactly sure how they do that. If anybody knows how the AIA LMSAL draws in those lines, I'm sure it's probably a computer program that makes complicated measurements and then puts them in. I doubt obviously a person's not drawing all those lines in. But anyway, before we move on, I just wanted to cite our featured channels again. Shout out to all of those. Dr. Pierre-Marie Robitaille of Sky Scholar, Oppenheimer Ranch Project, David Moriello, Suspicious Observers Ben Davidson, David Schlottower, meteorologist, and Dutch Sintz, the earthquake dude. And by the way, if you're in a tsunami zone and a tsunami warning is issued and you see the ocean retracting, after the tsunami warning was retracted, run to the hills, because I'm not sure exactly the way it worked in Indonesia yesterday, but there were conflicting reports about whether or not a tsunami warning was retracted before the tsunami arrived. Anyway, let's not get too into the weeds on that. Checking spaceweather.com for the current solar wind conditions. Let's look at the Discover 1-minute updates. Give it a minute to load. It's worth it. All right. So, the BTBZ is a little more convergent than it was. Phi angle is looking like it's around 135. Solar wind density, 6.51 protons per cubic centimeter. Speed, 393 kilometers per second. So very low. Not as low as it gets, but quite low. And let's look at spaceweathernews.com to see that it gets even lower. So X-ray flux is still fairly flatlined. Tiny bit of flaring, but nothing outside the mid-A range. Now, magnetometer looked like it was going to level off around 50 nanotesla, but then it's dropped even lower. KP index has dropped to a level of 2. And the electron flux. So we got a weak magnetometer reading, and we got a very weak electron flux right now at the same time. Which means the planet's going to want to give up negative charge, give up electrons. Here's your F2 ionosphere layer. And there's your aurora, which will probably shrink. Now, keep in mind, KP index is going to go up, because we are going to get a coronal wind stream, but that's not going to happen for a few days yet. All right, hey, thanks for viewing the videos. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Share the videos with your pals and with your foes, friends and foes. More to come soon. And don't forget to have an emergency plan, because if you're struck by an earthquake or a tsunami, you'll want to know what to do first. Just thinking about a disaster makes you more prepared for one. Being actually prepared for one makes you very likely to survive one. Cheers!